Welcome back to Learning to Read with me. Today we're going to be reading stories from Hans Christian Andersen, retold by Andrew Matthews. Today's story will be The Ugly Duckling. In the shade of a clump of reeds that grew beside a pool, a duck sat on her nest, waiting for her eggs to hatch. She had grown tired of sitting there, for none of her friends had come to visit. They preferred swimming on the pond, and at long last the eggs began to crack. Yellow ducklings popped their heads out of the shells. Peep, peep, quack, quack, said the mother, out of those shells and into the world as fast as you like. She peered into the nest. Still one big egg to go. How much longer will I have to sit here? An old duck pushed her head through the reeds to say hello. How are things? She asked. See my pretty ducklings, said the mother duck. All my eggs have hatched except this big one. Said the old duck. It looks like a turkey's egg to me. Someone slipped a turkey's egg into my nest once as a joke. It took a long time to hatch, and the young one was useless at swimming. I'd leave it there if I were you. I've hatched the other eggs, and I'll hatch this one, snapped the mother duck. I hate leaving things half finished. Please yourself, said the old duck, waddling back to the pond. After an hour or so, the big egg cracked. The young one tumbled out. Peep, peep. Gracious, what a big, ugly duckling, thought the mother. He's twice the size of his brothers and sisters, and he's grey, not yellow. I wonder if he could be a turkey, like the old duck said. I'll soon find out when we go swimming. The next morning, the sun was shining. The mother duck took her young ones to the edge of the pond. Splash! In she went. Quack, quack, quick, follow me, she called. One by one, the ducklings jumped into the water. Plip, plop, ploop. Before long, they were swimming happily, even the grey, ugly one. He's no turkey, the mother said to herself. Look how he uses his legs. If he was a bit smaller and more yellow and didn't have such a long neck, he'd be quite handsome. Come with me, children. It's time you saw the farmyard. Make sure no one steps on you and watch out for the cat. The farmyard was busy and noisy. There were many ducks there, and they stared at the newcomers in an unfriendly way. This place is crowded enough already, one duck said loudly, and we definitely don't want that big ugly duckling about the place. The duck flew across the yard and pecked the ugly duckling on the neck. Leave him alone, said the mother. He isn't hurting anyone. He hurts my eyes with his ugly face, said the duck. Your other children are pretty, but that grey one, ugh! After that, things got even worse for the ugly duckling. The ducks chased him, the hens pecked him, even his own brothers and sisters were nasty to him. Ugly face, scraggy neck, they kept saying. We hope the cat catches you. At last, the ugly duckling could stand no more. He hopped over the farmyard wall and didn't stop running until he reached the muddy marshes where the wild ducks lived. There He lay down all night, tired and miserable. In the morning, some wild ducks flew over to look at him. "What an ugly youngster," sneered one. "I'm glad I don't have to look at him every day." The ugly duckling bowed his head. He stayed on the edge of the marsh for 2 days, too lonely and sad to move. Then a pair of newly hatched wild geese came across him. They were friendly and cheeky. "You're so ugly, we feel sorry for you," they said. "Would you like to be friends and come for a swim with us? It might cheer you up." At that moment, a loud bang, bang, split the air, and geese fell dead. There was more banging, and a huge flock of geese flew into the air. Hunters were after them. The hunters fired so many times that the smoke from their guns hung in the trees like mist. Dogs charged through the marshes, barking and splashing. The duckling was terrified. As he was trying to hide, a great savage dog came up to him, snarling and showing its long teeth. It took one sniff and then, splosh, it ran off. "It bust me my grey feathers." The duckling sighed with relief. "I'm so ugly, even hungry dogs won't bite me." The hunting went on for hours, and the duckling was too frightened to move. But as soon as the shooting stopped, he ran from the marshes as fast as his little legs would go. Just before evening, a storm gathered. A howling wind pushed and prodded the ducklings. He came to a hut that was so rickety it was only standing because the walls couldn't decide which way they should fall down. The duckling saw a hole in the door of the hut and squeezed through to find shelter. An old woman lived in the hut with her tomcat and her hen. Next morning, the old woman noticed the ugly duckling at once, but her sight was so bad she thought he was a full-grown female duck. "Perhaps this duck will lay me some eggs," she said. "I'll keep it shut in for a while and see what happens." The cat and the hen didn't like the idea of sharing their home with a stranger. "Can you lay eggs?" asked the hen. "No," said the duckling. "Can you purr and catch mice?" said the cat. "No." "Then you'd better keep out of our way and don't speak unless you're spoken to." The duckling sat down in a dingy corner. When he saw sunshine streaming through the holes in the walls, he sighed loudly. "I wish I could be outside. I want to swim on the water and dive down to the bottom." "What nonsense!" snorted the hen. "It's not nonsense. It's wonderful," the duckling cried. "If it's so wonderful, why haven't I seen the cat or the old woman swimming about underwater?" said the hen. "You can't lay eggs, you can't purr. All you can do is sit in the corner, letting your head fill up with peculiar ideas. We've taken you into our warm hut and treated you kindly, and all you do in return is talk nonsense." The duckling hung its head in shame. "Perhaps it would be better if I went back out into the wide world," he said. "That's the first sensible thing I've heard you say," clucked the hen. So the duckling squeezed out through the gap in the door. He found a lake to swim on and dive under, but he was alone. He looked so ugly that no other creature would come near him. Autumn came. It turned the forest leaves yellow made them spin in the wind. The air turned chill and made the duckling shiver. One evening, just as the sun was setting, a flock of swans flew overhead on whistling wings. The duckling had never seen anything so beautiful. The swans' feathers were so white they shone, and their slender necks were stretched out straight. The duckling didn't know what birds they were or where they were going, but somehow they made him feel lonelier and sadder than ever. Winter came. It made the trees stiff with frost, and the duckling had to keep swimming around in the water to stop it from freezing over. There was hardly any food, and the nights were bitterly cold, yet somehow the duckling survived. Spring came, the ice melted, and the bright sun warmed the duckling and gave him strength. He stretched out his wings and flapped them, and before he knew what was happening, he was flying. He landed with a great splash in the wide river whose banks were lined with willow trees. To his amazement, the duckling saw 3 swans push their way through the willow branches. They slid into the water and came gliding straight towards him. "They're going to peck me," said the duckling, trembling. "But I don't care if they peck me to death. I'd rather die than go back to the farmyard or have to face another hungry winter alone." The duckling bent his head to the water. There was his reflection, quivering underneath him. But there was something different about it. Instead of an ugly duckling, he found himself looking at a beautiful swan. The other swans swam around him, touching his neck with their beaks and admiring him. 2 children appeared on the riverbank with their parents. They had come to feed the swans with bread and cake. "Look at the new swan! Isn't he lovely?" they shouted. "See how he hides his head under his wing. He must be shy." The new swan did feel shy. He was used to being pecked and picked on, not admired. "But I was such an ugly duckling," he whispered. "Of course you were," laughed the other swans. "Didn't you know? Every beautiful swan was an ugly duckling once." When he heard this, the new swan felt full of joy, and he lifted his dazzling white head to the spring sun. That was The Ugly Duckling by Hans Andersen. Thank you for learning to read with me.